So we're Martian Lawyers Club, or part of a studio called Martian Lawyers Club. I'm Marlon. This is Levi. We started it about a couple years ago in Bristol. And our whole kind of concept about the company is developing games that utilize AI in a way to make games that you couldn't create without this technology. So hopefully we can get our slides up in just a second. Oh, look at that.
Sorry, is it possible to turn up the mic?
Oh, can you not hear me at all?
Hold it closer to your mouth, I was speaking.
Hello. Is that better?
Eat the mic.
Eat the
mic? Eat the
Oh,
mic,
that
yeah.
doesn't sound very hygienic. What if I talk like this? Is that
No,
better?
you need to hold it.
But Ben's going to go down and see if he can get
Okay.
the mic turned up. But if you
The
carry on,
closer you hold it to your mouth.
Like this.
Yeah.
Is
that's
that better? There we go.
Cool. Awesome. Great, we can see that. Perfect.
Here's the mic. You have to put this basically in your mouth.
Hey everyone, I'm Levi, and this has all the components of a very annoying title, AI and the future. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me
You
fine.
have to keep it right close to your mouth.
Like
the mic.
basically
Yeah.
touch.
Cool. Okay, so actually what we are going to do is we're going to kind of speed run you through 10 minutes of why we think AI is cool for game design, but not try and sell you anything. Really, we're going to tell you about the game that we built, some theories we came up with game design, and what you can do with AI that we think is actually compelling and new. And then Ron's going to dive you into some of the problems we face and how we solve those from a game design angle. So, 2 seconds, I'm going to do my backup, which is my downloads. All right, so we're going to go PDF mode. So, who are we? Marlon kind of already mentioned it, but it's important to kind of talk a bit about background and why I'm standing here. But my background is in machine learning video games. I've been doing it for the last 8 years. I did a PhD in video game design using machine learning, and I went to Ubisoft and Forge, and Adobe did some research to kind of think about what does this technology give us from a design angle. That led through multiple prototypes, trying to think about what's the future of games. And in the end, 2 years ago, we decided to start a game studio called Martian Lawyers Club, where we actually tried to build this technology and give it in the hands of players.
Cool. In brief introduction, I'm Marlon. Before Martian Lawyers Club, I set up a tabletop games company called Megament Games, where I designed and published card games and board games.
So this is our game, Gug. It is, in 2 sentences, a roguelike creature battler that is Inscription meets Pokemon. You can type in whatever you want, and you get a creature with the power. Marlon will dive a bit more into actually what that looks like and what that means, but what I'm going to talk about is something that we call data-driven design. You could also call it AI design. And it's really, why is AI interesting for a game designer? To kind of get to that, I kind of want to ask the question, what is game design? You're going to find hundreds of answers to that in textbooks. Our answer to this is that game design is a communication between a player and a game designer through a world built by the game designer, where the game designer defines the rules of the interaction. They say, these are the actions that you can take, and these are how the world updates according to those actions. And with that kind of framing and theory, we're going to move into how AI can be used to build interesting games. First, though, some kind of grounding. Some of the examples of this sort of communication system. Clicking a button in Mario makes us jump. Clicking in Age of Mythology, the mouse moves an entity somewhere. Typing in text adventures, very rich form of interaction, results in updating the world state. Or swiping in Beat Saber cuts a block. We kind of think of the evolution of games as the evolution of the designer's message. A few actions do many things. We can see Pong as a very primitive kind of update of the game state given a set of controls. We've got the controller, we've got the keyboard, the paddle moves up and down, depending on how we want to define the inputs. But we can go all the way to crazy updates to the game state, quick time events, or single button pushes that give you enormous power. But less so is the evolution of what we call the player's message, or what we say is many actions do many things. These games are a little bit more complicated. They're like the text adventures, where I can type in anything I want to, and it could potentially do anything. Or Scribblenauts is a great traditional example. I can type in what I want, and I get an object representing what I'm requesting. And VR and physics is also a great example of this. But this is a really hard type of game to make. And the question we ask is, why is that so hard to make that type of game? And the factor kind of, you think about it, it's like, okay, there's a lot of control inputs, there's a lot of game state updates, I have to represent a lot of change, it's very combinatorial, it gets very difficult. But actually, we think the challenge is not necessarily in the design space as much as in this space, is the code space. We're kind of negative about code. And we'll talk to you about why that is the case. But really what we want to say is, what is it that designers want, or what are they interested in? And if we look towards board games and tabletop games, we see a lot of interesting flexibility there. The design space is about, what is my engine? What is my world? I don't know necessarily what my player's going to do. They might do action A, B, or A and a half. And how does my world respond to these unknown actions? So if we look at how we build something like this, I kind of might say that this is really hard to build with code. I'm happy to talk about that and be challenged by it, but it's going to take you a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of technical knowledge. So our main thesis is actually that game design thinking is limited by code-based thinking, and we should flip this narrative on its head. So you're probably wondering, where does the AI come into this? I just want to pay quick respects to code. I am a programmer myself. I understand that code is done this very far. This is my pay respect slide. Procedural generation, I think, is the zenith of code, and we've done some great things with it. But if we want to achieve this vision, what does it look like? So to me, it looks like us taking a parallel to what meteorologists do when they're trying to understand a complex system. They do something called forecasting, and they usually don't write algorithms to try and solve their problems. Instead, they build models and they gather data so that they can kind of begin to forecast. And if we're treating our game and our world as a complex system, we can think, okay, how can we build a model? How can we get the data we want to understand our player, how they might interact with our world? The tricky thing is that we don't have that data, and building that model can be quite tricky. It takes a lot of time, it requires a lot of effort. So there's a cheat code for us, at least for us indie developers, which is to take something that someone else has built. So to us, Gen AI is sort of these large AI models. We can call it like a cultural technology that contains all the digital media out there synthesized into a shared representation that we can kind of exploit. We can tune this thing, mine this thing, farm this thing, and allow it to kind of be the dream controller for our game. So I'm going to kind of wrap up on the theory side here really fast, but really what it comes down to is data-driven design is actually treating your controller like you might do a chatbot. My player did A, how does my game update? But we don't all want to build text adventures, so what we actually do is we spit out code. So my game was A, we spit out a piece of code to update the game state. And in this way, we think we can kind of achieve very flexible game design, which is a player can request a creature and we output actually code to run that creature. With that, I'm going to give some time for Marlon to actually talk about how we do this in practice with Go.
Cool. So, yeah, how do you actually now get this technology and put it into this player reactive world in a way that the player understands and doesn't just completely collapse? So, I don't think any of our gifts are going to be working today. Oh, wait, what button did you push?
Right on the arrow key.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we'll have no animations.
Awesome. So there's going to be no animations. It was normally really cool, but we'll just pretend like it is. So we're going to delve into GUG a little bit in our process with using this technology in a game. So to start off with, this is a GUG. A GUG is a little biological creature that can alter its anatomy based off whatever the player types. And then here's a really freaking cool video that's not going to play, where a player puts a GUG on a spot, they type in the word queen, and in return they're given a fully custom image, effect, name, and stats that all pertain to what the players typed in. And the effect was summon 2 night GUGs. And then they place this GUG on a spot and it summons 2 night GUGs. And it's a fully functional effect. So we call that transcending in the world of GUG, and pretty much the player collects this, assembles a team of all these GUGs, and they transcend them with all these weird, wacky effects that ensue. And they grow very emotionally attached to these creatures, inevitably to watch them die and then start over again. As Levi alluded to earlier, it's kind of like the lane-based combat you get in Inscription meets like a Pokemon-style creature collector team building, but your evolution's in the style of Scribblenauts. So this is all really cool on a surface level, right? The player can make what they want and then watch it battle. But if we delve into it a little deeper, as Levi said, as designers, we have to anticipate or hope that players have prior game knowledge, right? They know how to press a button. They know how to use a joystick. They know how to type on a keyboard. But this technology opens up a whole new array of inputs we can now take in. So for GUG, we take in up to 20 characters, but each character actually has meaning behind it. You could see a game that takes in an image, right, or a video, or even a game that looks at its own current state and generates code based off of how the player's been interacting with the game. And not only that, right, we can take in these new inputs, but we can react to them using this technology in a meaningful way to build a unique experience that's tailored to the player. So for GUG, we get a lot of RPG players come in, and the first thing they type in is warrior, and they get a warrior GUG. But another thing they type in is like AoE healing. And now that's a very niche phrase that not a lot of people understand. For instance, my mother has no idea what AoE healing means, but she can still type in something like doily. And she gets a GUG that's tailored to her preferences, right? Her interests and her playstyle. And that's in the same game that a player who has an RPG background can still type in warrior, and they get a fun tailored experience. And we find this builds a very strong emotional connection between the player and the game in a very short amount of time, because this is now their creature. And all they did was type in 20 characters and hit enter. And this is because basically the player's culture is impacting the game. This is now their game in a way. To summarize, this is like an ultimate form of player accessibility, right? A player can build a creature using inputs, typing that they already understand, and combine it with knowledge they already have. And for a designer, this is very handy, because now I don't have to assume, oh, the player has a super deep understanding of my game. And it's nice for the player because they can come in and start creating meaningful decisions and actions in the game with just knowledge they already have from existing. They don't need to know the intricacies of my game, right, and all the best specs. So this gets really out of hand very fast because we now have to build this world that can encompass all of this unpredictable effects that we don't know what's going to happen. So we have a lot of lessons we learned, but I wanted to highlight kind of the four main lessons we came up with to make it so this world didn't just kind of collapse. The first one from the get-go was embrace the chaos. We knew this technology can be pretty unpredictable, so we very early on decided this is a single-player roguelike game. It's a roguelike because we knew players would abruptly die, but we also wanted them to keep experimenting and exploring the plane of inputs and GUGs that they can make. And we also made it a single-player game because we knew most players, when they start off, they think they're being sneaky and type an instant win. And it creates them a GUG that instantly wins the game. And in single-player, that's funny. But in PvP, it's not funny if you're going second in the battle, is it? And this is one of my favorite abilities here. It triggers when the player loses the game. And it just says, convert loss to a win. So we have all sorts of chaotic abilities. The second lesson we learned was to set hard rails. And we don't mean in a way to restrict the chaos, right? We definitely wanted the player to experience that, but in a way that the player didn't accidentally break the game without realizing it and have an unintended experience. So an example in GUG, this was a playtest GIF, is when you attack an empty lane, coins drop on the battlefield. And the number of coins that drop is equal to the GUG's attack, which is mainly 3. But in this case, the player got 10,000 attack. And 10,000 individual coins had to drop on the battlefield. And once they got 1 million attack, the game crashes. Right? So we have all these little caps to prevent that experience from happening. And in a similar vein, we always want to know where the player is when they're breaking the game. So in GUG, an effect can only ever trigger on the battlefield and during a battle. And it can only affect anything that happens in the battlefield. So it can destroy a GUG, it can create a GUG, it can even create a brand new player to fight against. But what a GUG can't do is it can't ever create an effect that affects the shop or the main menu. And although we could enable that, we purposely lock it behind a door because it would be very confusing if you went to the main menu and the start game button was permanently deleted. And then kind of as a last lesson, this one's a little bit of a bonus one. Again, this was a really cool bit. Is all our GUGs get stored in a database. So at this point, we have about 300,000 GUGs. And what's a really cool feature with that is we can bring those down as enemies in other players' runs. So every time you're playing a game and you enter, it's a brand new experience, right? You have this infinite learning potential. You always are coming across something new. And just by having other players play the game and bring a part of themselves into it, your game's growing even when you're not there to help it grow. So we have this constant just database that's always alive. It feels like a living game. So these were the major lessons that we learned when working with this technology and putting it into GUG, and that's pretty much the wrap up.
Yeah, just to close, thanks for bearing with the static slides and also with the time. But yeah, our view is that there's different design principles within games, and we're kind of interested when AI can push us to a space where we haven't designed before, and there's potential opening opportunity to build cool games in that area, not just automate design practices we already have. So thank you for listening.
Right.
We're going to get a few questions because one of the Martian Lawyers Club will join the panel shortly. So while I'm chatting, Harriet, if you want to get ready to go. One of the Martian Lawyers Club will join the panel where we'll discuss this stuff. So I'm sure lots of discussion spark from seeing their presentation. So you'll get a chance to kind of ask stuff around there now. And then, as I say, so keep your kind of any questions, jot them down, something like that. If you've got an AI assistant, get that to remember them and remind you later on to ask the question about it. And then, so we're going to do this next presentation now, and then we'll do a quick break, people grab drinks, and then we'll go on to the panel discussion. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so. Hi, thanks to folks for that presentation. That was really cool. This is going to be something completely different, I'm afraid, and not really about games. But I did work in the games industry for a little bit. So. And can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So hi, my name is Harriet. I'm part of a collective in Bristol called Machine Streams. And over the past year or so, we've been looking at the concept of querying AI. With running workshops with artists and researchers and a cohort of queer people in Bristol that kind of went all the way through with us throughout the year. And I'm still not sure what querying AI means, so that is okay if anyone else is quite confused by that. Let me just do the next slide. So, we ran 5 workshops to have creative responses to the use of mini AI that's like the brand of AI, like LLMs and image generators and voice AI assistants. We worked on things like even looking quite broadly at how queer people use strategies around around real life, like you might code switch, you might dress differently or speak differently, depending on what situation you are, and looking at how that might mean that we interact with AI differently. I just wanted to highlight a couple of workshops that we did. One of them was with my collaborator, Francesco Bentibegna, who is a professor at Bristol Uni. And this was Queer AI, or Queer Utopia. For this, we kind of collaborated with LLMs and image generators, using the inputs and outputs to tell stories and imagine what a queer utopia would look like, and how the technology would fit in. So this is kind of some of the outputs. We also had a live illustrator, so we didn't take any photos. We had like an illustrator there drawing stuff, which was really cool. And it was really interesting to compare like the really messy, creative, like visionary things that the humans in the room were coming up with. And then when they put them into AI, the response would be very bland. It would be, I'm sure we've all seen these image generators, and we talked to ChatGPT, like, it wasn't matching like the inspiration in the room, I guess, because of what's being put into it maybe, or because of how the data is trained, and that was kind of really interesting. Another workshop that we did, some more illustrations. Another workshop we did was with an artist called Batul Dasuki. And this was looking at the protocols of queer conduct. So we looked at how there's like certain implicit and explicit rules for how we both interact with humans and how we interact with computers. So you might be familiar if you've ever done any coding with like an HTTP request or like APIs. There's like explicit contracts with how you interact with technology. But there's also like implicit things about meeting people, like shaking hands or do you hug someone, and that's often like quite difficult for neurodivergent people or people who aren't familiar with the culture that they're in, or people that for whatever reason just don't have the same cultural capital of like whoever they're interacting with. And how we kind of brought that back to AI is that we wanted to look at standards or kind of tips for interacting with AI. So we drew up a code of conduct that was based on, we've all seen these code of conduct stuff for businesses and organizations, and they're kind of quite funny to read sometimes because they're a bit performative. Like people write them and then never look at them. They're not always like living documents. Like and like famously, Google had "Don't be evil" in their offices, but they took that down. They don't really mind being evil now. Yeah, we wanted to think about with AI and like big technology, the way that you interact with it is defined by the company. Like Facebook put us all into these blue and white boxes. You know, we fit into how they're designed for us to use it. And I guess a way of querying that is setting our own rules. So maybe setting our own kind of standards for how we talk to it. So yeah, we looked a little bit at that. And I can share links for this. Sorry, I haven't got any good links for it at the moment. But this was all gearing up to take all of the outputs from these workshops, and we've got a manifesto that we've written that is a toolkit as well for people that want to educate themselves about AI and understand everything from the infrastructure to how it's being deployed at the moment. Yeah, and we're going to publish that very soon. But it's currently live on which I can sorry, I can send a link to, but I don't have it at the moment. But the main thing that really stood out to me was that although we were quite negative about AI, we didn't think there was an inherent evilness to AI. It's not inherently bad, as you were saying in the introduction, but the way that it's used and weaponized by corporations, like it is damaging our environment. And it's like an accelerant for all the shitty stuff that big tech has been doing for decades. If you look at the bad labor practices, the extraction from content creators, like the alienation, isolation of individuals. There's a really great book called Atlas of AI by Kate Atkinson. That it goes into like everything from where the precious metals are being mined and the exploitation of the labor there to how it's being built by big companies. But alongside all of that, and the kind of dire state of the world at the moment, there was a lot of hope and optimism for alternatives that queering our relationship with technology by hacking it, by damaging it, and building community alternatives. There's a lot of optimism for what that could provide, and a lot of willingness from our participants to learn about different options and to build a kind of community response to it. What we also found was divesting from big tech and AI can cause a lot of friction. Like refusing to use Google is a huge difficulty at the moment. Like if you don't want to use Gmail, what are you going to use? And a lot of people are leaving WhatsApp now because of the complications with Meta. But we found that the friction was worth it, and the more that you did it, the easier that it became, and it's kind of worth the price of having agency over your life and not supporting these like big evil companies. So yeah, if anyone wants to chat more about that afterwards, I'll be around.
We were stuck in a bind with that on. It blinded the people. With that off, we've lost the light. So let's try it without mic, and hopefully this will work. And let us know at the back if you can't hear people. Right. So let me start off by, if I start on this side of the panel, move your way across. If you just do a very quick, brief intro to yourself, and then we'll kick off with the questions. So start on this side.
Sure, yeah, I won't repeat too much of what I already said before, but I will say that my background is in the idea of applying machine learning to video games. This all started for me at the University of Edinburgh, where I studied machine learning and animation. I've seen what people have been done inside Ubisoft or Ford for applying machine learning to games, what they do in Adobe, and now I am running my own company where we're trying to productize AI for indie devs.
And remind us again your name.
Oh yes, and I'm Levi.
Levi.
Yeah. Yeah, that's me, I'll leave it at that.
Hi, Simon Barratt, so CEO of Cooperative Innovations and also CEO of jeco, which is it's automated optimization tool, so looking at sustainability and also optimization of CPU, GPU. 26 years in games, started as a programmer, 20 years running studios and playing with AI for probably about 20 odd years as well, neural networks through to modern LLMs and everything else. And also a UKI board member as well, so the sort of trade body policy side, so advising government on policy and copyright law, all that kind of stuff.
Hi, I'm Harriet Morley from earlier. I am a software engineer by day. I work in civic tech, but I'm also an artist on the side, and I work on like DIY server poems at the moment. For my sins, I did work at a mobile games company for a year. It was a bingo app, and I worked in user support, so I'm very familiar with mobile gamers.
Hi, it's good to be here. I'm Damian Grimshaw from King's College London. I'm here with my partner in crime, Marlon, who's Professor of Innovation at the same place. And we got funding from the Economic and Social Research Council to do research in the British games industry to look at the effects of AI and on skills and teamwork and how different functions in the games studios are changing. So I'm pretty new to the understanding the industry, but it's finding it very fascinating. And we happened to interview Tomas about his work and his company, and then he's kindly invited us here, and so hopefully we'll get to know each other better. And it'd be nice to meet as many of you as possible because we're really keen to talk to as many people as we can in the industry. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm going to try and project as much as I can. I'm Ben, I'm one of the directors with Tomas of the Games Hub, and I have been interested in AI for a long time, but mostly in 2016 I started a podcast because everyone has to have a podcast, right? So I've got a podcast on AI and ethics, and I've been talking about that for a while, and sometimes people pay me to talk about it, which is great. And I also teach data science, and I also have a games company. So there are kind of the things.
Perfect. Right. And I think I should say for transparency, I'm an investor in jeco, so just to be transparent of one of the investors, and just be transparent where we are. Okay, so let's start up with the first question, and I'll start with you, Simon, as I know you're working very enmeshed in tech. Is AI living up to the hype? Like you absolutely do see hype pieces, and you see people saying it is hype, and other people saying it's not. Where's your view? Is this hype, not hype?
I think, we talk about hype, and like blockchain and crypto is obviously a big thing for a long time, and we've seen huge investment go into that, and there's probably a lot of wasted stuff. It's an ideology rather than a useful tool. I think AI is proving to be a tool for certain tasks applied in the right way. Personally, I think we're plateauing in terms of where LLMs and the current technology can go. So if you listen to Jan LeCun, I think is the way you pronounce his name, from Meta, so he's the head of AI. He was the guy who literally came up with transformers in the first place, which led to GPT. He thinks that GPT won't go any further right now. So his team at Meta is basically looking at what is the next model that actually understands the world and how the world we live in works, because language, it turns out, is quite a simple thing from a statistical point of view. So that's why LLMs actually work reasonably well at the sort of tasks we're seeing it do well with right now. we're seeing lots of hacks on top of it, like reasoning models, the new things at O1 and all these new things you're seeing come through. That's passing the same result through and through and through again, using sort of software engineering around these LLMs to make them do more interesting stuff. So I think that technology is interesting, but it's burning a lot of power to do those things and isn't always getting the results we want. So to answer your question, yes, it's living up to the hype because it's solving interesting problems. But I think we're hitting a point of diminishing returns.
Okay, well, Ben, do you concur with Simon? Is it the hype? No?
So we have to go fight.
Yes. I get the feeling that people, like some people think it's the new hot shit, right? And it's going to keep going. And people who are kind of in the area are more like, no, what's the next thing? Like we have to think about what the next innovation is. We had Transformers. This is only like 2 years ago, right? And before that, we had this kind of explosion of deep learning. And we're on this trajectory, and I feel like, we don't know what's around the corner, and we're still kind of picking the fruit of what we can do with what we have currently.
Well, just before I'll come to you, Levi, to weigh in on that, and then I'll come down. Could one of you two just define Transformers for everybody? Because I know what you mean, but for those of us who are thinking, is it a Decepticon or an Autobot? Can you define one? Because we also don't mean the electronic transformer.
Yeah.
We mean, Simon?
So effectively, previously we had neural networks, so backpropagation was the way that the same guy came up with that we trained neural networks in the first place. So given an input and an output, you can train the neural network to actually get the correct result you want to have. So Transform was his way of adding lots of these together with different inputs and outputs and between different neural networks, which leads to where we got the LLMs. OpenAI's innovation on top of that work was effectively feeding the entire internet into one of these, and it turns out it's quite smart at doing things.
Perfect.
That's as sort of good an explanation. Yeah.
Right. So then now I'll come to you. You're working in it. Do you feel it's living up to the hype of? Because you designed a game that sounds amazing.
I know. I'm actually pro hype. I think it's living up to the hype, and there's a lot more to come. And I don't mean that in an inevitability way. I think actually what's happening is it's not that things are accelerating and there's more people solving problems. I think we've cracked open I come at this from a research angle, and we've sort of cracked open a cavity, which is there's been 40 years, as you alluded to, of research in deep learning, people solving interesting problems in graphics and video games, and those have kind of been sat to the side. There's a lot of interesting papers out there that people are just pulling up now. And what they're doing is they're getting these ideas and they're actually putting it into industry applications, and there's so many unknowns. And so what we're really seeing is a filling of this cavity where there's research to be converted into industry. And so the acceleration and the hype is really actually finding ways to put these in the hands of people. And these research papers do solve what I would say would be authentic problems.
Great. And Harriet, you spent all that time in those workshops and meshing it, thinking about it. Did it make you feel the hype, it is too much hype, or no, there's something there, or not even engage on that because that wasn't what you were looking at?
I guess, like for me as an individual, I don't use it in my day-to-day life, and as working in tech, I'm pretty grumpy about the hype cycle. Like I used to work in publishing when the iPad came out, and everyone's like, the iPad's going to change how we read books, and it didn't. I know this is like a different scale, and it's all very like complicated, but I also work in civic tech, and I've seen how like a simple HTML form that's well designed can change someone's life, because they can now have access to NHS services, or they can report stuff to their council. So to me, I've not bought into the hype, I guess, but it's not my domain. So yeah.
So I guess one more thing on the hype would be LinkedIn and all the big investors obviously always talking about they can do this or that. Very selective sort of survivor bias of those examples you tend to see. So software engineering is being seen as a thing which has been attacked right now in terms of LLMs being able to code and everything else. OpenAI actually did their own research paper which came out a few weeks back, and they put all the top sort of reasoning models against, it was $1 million worth of freelance contracts available on the internet, and they put all of the top models against these, and 16.5% was the best result they got in terms of achieving those problems. Quite simple, well-defined problems. So and what the cost was to actually solve those problems wasn't defined in the research paper. It was like, we should look into what was the profit on these things doing it, right? Because if it's more than paying a programmer to do it, then what is the point really from the point of view of these CEOs and these companies?
That's a good point. Thank you. And Damian, you've been talking to a lot of games companies. I don't know whether you want to do your own take on it or talk about the general impression you've got from talking to games companies about the hype.
Well, I think when we came into this project, we've been working a little bit on AI and how it was reconfiguring skills and job growth, job change. So we chose the games industry because it's this sort of perfect combination of these, assets. I didn't know this term before looking at the industry, but it's got all these assets which are almost perfectly exposed to generative AI. So it's the perfect industry to look at. If you're going to find change anywhere, you're going to find it in this industry. And we've been talking to people, probably in about 15 different companies, and checking the data, the sort of aggregate industry data on jobs. I mean, you'll all know that there's sort of the job growth, which was enormous over the last 2 decades, has plateaued from what we can tell. And everybody we're talking to, I mean, the 2 big things that come out are the sort of speed of change, and nobody really feels like they're keeping up, but need to keep up, but there's always something new. And the other thing is just the extreme malleability of jobs. That everybody's sort of playing around at the edges of what their job can do. So I think, there's a lot of hype, but there's a lot of consequences at the moment. It seems like we're just in the middle of some very interesting transition. I mean, our worry is that we've only got funding for this 12 months, and it seems like this is a transition, and we need to come back, in a year's time to see. So, but yeah, I'm sort of worried, but also I'm curious about what's happening. But it's a huge scale of change. I haven't seen in any industry.
Thank you. So I want to come to I think one of the, so so when I was running Auroch Digital, we had a big company discussion, and really it came down to I suppose one of better term, the ethics around it. And there was a lot of discussion. People come both ways. And at this point, and again, I'm paraphrasing 2 different takes on stuff. So one group of people are saying, if AI is copying stuff off the internet, that is no different from somebody going around an art gallery and then doing their own painting. And then another take on it is, no, it isn't the same, because a human being doesn't machine-like take all that stuff in and regurgitate it in that way. A human being's take on stuff isn't an exact, whereas an AI is taking all of that, is taking the exact data, not glancing over as it wanders around a gallery. They're not the same sort of thing. But I'll start with you, Ben, because I know this is your area.
Yeah.
And this is also, if anyone's paying attention to news, there's a big debate now going on where the government is proposing new legislation around AI, and there's a huge debate around the creative industries. Mostly, interestingly, not the games industry bodies have weighed in either side, but certainly the creative industries, film, TV, have weighed in on the copyright protection should stop AI companies doing it, and the AI companies, on the other hand, saying, no, in order for us to advance this technology, we need to not be hamstrung by constantly being in and out of court. So if I can come to you, Ben, on that, and then we can come around where you feel the ethics of the data that trains these things comes from.
The data. So I wanted to pick up on how you formulated that.
Yeah.
So you were talking about it as if people were annoyed that they had their data stolen from them. Like, we have all this stuff on the internet, and we're annoyed that we have this stuff taken from us, right? And where does that come from? Like, is that our data? If you go back, 10 years and go, how could we do this? And you go, well, we've got all this stuff on the internet. We could do that, right? It seems obvious. The problem that we have is that the exploitation of that data is the problem, right? So we're not here worried that our next door neighbor is exploiting our data, or the government in a way is exploiting our data. It's the Googles and the open AIs of the world that are exploiting this data. So the framing of it is always, in my mind, comes back to the capitalist situation and how the corporations are doing this stuff to us. So it's kind of like, if you imagine a world where we can all do this stuff or the government can do this stuff, it really changes the situation, right? Like, if we are all empowered in a way that, we can create things how we want to, and we don't have to pay for it in the way that we are hamstrung by these organizations, then it really reconfigures everything. So that's the first thing that I wanted to point out. Like, we are being exploited because of the capital. We're getting all our capital sucked away from us, which is part of this kind of data exchange. And secondly, this is the year, right? Like, if I'm going to forecast anything, this is the year we have to sort this out, right? All the copyright lawyers are like rummaging around, screaming at each other right now, and all these court cases are happening. They're happening now. So I think by the end of the year, I think we'll get like a definitive answer, like, because we have to sort this stuff out. We have to say, this is okay, and we're going to move on, and everyone has to kind of like suck it up, or this is not okay, and the whole thing changes like completely, and we all go back into the dark ages and have like big mallets and stuff. No, like, you know what I mean? We have to like.
That's a bit extreme.
Well, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know if anybody else got thoughts on that.
I mean, I can and have spoken for hours and hours about this. So this is not me with Yuki board member hat, because we've had those conversations, and you know we sort of fed back on the consultation. Like I said, I can speak for a long time on it. I think ultimately, people using the tech, they are still responsible because they output and they publish the output. They are then under the copyright laws and what they've done with that. So you can sue someone for producing something similar to what you earn, and then you have copyright over, regardless of how you generated that. So that's like a court thing as well. I think the courts will hopefully this year start to find some rulings on this stuff. Like, policies in governments take years because you have to, you know, wait for the King's Speech or Queen's Speech, whatever, to bring certain things into law. So the UK government, with this consultation right now, is going to be years before anything actually comes through. So hopefully the court cases do resolve some of it. But, you know, for years and years, we've talked about GPL and all these different code licensing models that you have to describe in your documentation. I'm using this license or this license, whatever. That's been eroded completely by training data. So GitHub, Copilot, there's all these different coding tools. It's been trained on all this open source data without referencing those licenses anymore. Same way that YouTube content's been ripped from copyrighted games and films and everything else. Like, it's pretty much evident that OpenAI trained on YouTube data and, you know, all this other copyrighted stuff. And the challenge is that I see LLMs as being effectively a lossless compression system, in the same way that a JPEG on low quality would be, right? So if you took a low quality JPEG of a copyright image, that's still copyright infringing. And so I think that's where my challenge is right now, is that everything is being fed in is therefore copyright infringing. What I want to see is this cool tech, because people think I'm anti-AI when I'm saying this. I think we need to move back a few steps to build clean models based on public domain data, and then move forward with licensed data and produce the same results we're getting now. And there are research papers based on Creative Commons zero-based models, which do actually achieve 60-70% of the quality of the full models. It won't be as good as what we've got now, and maybe the cat's out of the bag sort of thing, but I think we can get back to that point.
And Levi, where are you getting the data that's training your GUGs?
Yeah, we use GPT for the GUGs.
Yeah.
And we use Stable Diffusion, which I'm sure people are familiar with, not openly licensed data. But I'm actually in complete agreement with both Ben and Simon. Actually, your point about the future of the models, especially there's some really interesting companies, the Luther AI, Bria AI. Interestingly, actually, also Adobe Firefly was trained off of
Ish.
Yeah, Ish. Getty Images had some strange data in there.
Yeah.
But like, there are hints, and I kind of want to drop in a message of hope, which is I actually think we can do it, but it's about having more messages like what you're saying, Ben, which is I think we got to find ways to elevate those companies and de-escalate the larger companies. Or at least communicate to people that you can still build cool things with like 60% accuracy in your language model. If every 20th word is wrong, maybe there's a game there, right?
And you probably have a legal right to publish it.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing, right? So publishing deals for years, you had to have the permission to give the license to your publisher or distribution platform that you own all the IP within there. If you don't own the IP in the model you're generating, then you can't give that permission. So that's what the lawyers are looking at now, is like, can you actually license that or publish that on certain platforms if it's generative AI based on a model you don't own necessarily?
Yeah. And Damian, Harriet, I don't know if you have thoughts on this question of the ethics of where the data is coming from?
Yeah, I guess I could just say something about, because even using Creative Commons stuff, then I guess there's also a question around who's making that Creative Commons stuff. Like, the canon of literature has, you know, the stuff that's not copyrighted is, not necessarily the most diverse works, and the open source community is like famously, actually I'm not sure, but not necessarily the most diverse community because so I guess then there's also ethics around the bias of the data that's being collected, and then the data that then that's going to output is going to be biased. So I don't know.
No.
I think that's to be thought about.
It's a good point.
I had a question. I don't know to see
yeah,
what
no,
other people think.
Fire it out.
Did you see, this case? I was just confused by the case. It was a case in China a year ago or a year and a half ago where somebody, I think for their own blog, they generated an AI image and then they used that on that blog. But then somebody else copied that image in their blog, so they sued the other person, like saying, no, but that AI image is mine, which seems dumb. But then the court took it seriously and said, actually, we found that the person who made that AI image made a sufficient level of intellectual contribution, and also the image is sufficiently original, although I don't know how they checked that. So they won and they got a sum of money. They sued the other person and they got a sum of money, right? But it's just confusing, right? So I mean, does that mean that
So it's complicated. 'Cause
AI images, AI voice, I mean, that can also be copyrighted because it's human generated?
Yeah,
It's
so-
just, I find it confusing.
So the actual law around machine generated content varies country to country. But then a lot of these companies are wrapping around the academic models, which said that you can't earn anything which is produced by these models. But then some companies have literally raised millions of pounds around these academic models, hiding that, and they're claiming that you own the rights to buy those items and images as well, because no one sees what's running on some server somewhere behind an API. And so actually a lot of them are exploiting non-commercial use models to do this stuff. So you don't own that whatsoever, which is why you could argue it either way, but most people aren't aware of that.
So should Britain copy the European AI Act, which is going to demand tech companies to be transparent about their content generation and also the energy consumption, which we might talk about later. But
So
those two things.
without wanting to jump in again, sorry, but like with a Yuki board hat off, full transparency of every single URL and every other purpose and where they're getting data. Like, I think they're playing video games and putting a webcam in front of it and completely ripping off everything right now. I think that's the level of, they've done the internet, they've done YouTube. What other sources do we have? So is it training data from people walking around streets, all that kind of stuff? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, right, that's good. Let's jump on to the next question, which is going to be the energy question. So yeah, and I mean, for me, this again, when you take a step back and look at the space, the numbers being talked about in terms of energy and everything, but to me, it's a good example of where it's very hard to know how it's going to go. So I gave the example in the introduction around the estimates that actual IT would increasingly use more energy. It actually hasn't. It's actually got down in it. But then there's a counter argument that says, but if the energy usage of AI comes down and makes it more ubiquitous, then it's everywhere. And even though it's using less energy, because it's everywhere, collectively it will use more energy. But then we have examples of technology where that's not happened. LED lights is a good example of a technology that uses a small amount of energy. They're more ubiquitous than they've ever been, but the total amount of resources we put into generating light energy is smaller than it was because they're so efficient. But ultimately, and then the counter argument that goes is we don't know that it's going to go like that. And again, people are talking, and the numbers are astronomical of the amount, they're talking about, on the one hand, building multiple nuclear power plants to power our queries about, can I have Star Wars cats, theme stuff. But on the other hand, this stuff's being used for fusion research, so maybe it might end up cracking an energy problem in the same. Genuinely difficult to know, and so I'll throw that back. Where are your thoughts on the kind of energy usage of it? Where it's going to go? Does it worry you? That kind of thing. You want to start, Levi?
Sure, yeah. On this topic, I will have less to contribute than the others. It's absurd. Like, it's kind of surreal that we are generating energy to produce cat Star Wars figures, and then we're trying to solve nuclear power at the same time. But I think, like, I come at these from a very hopeful angle. So without any numbers, I still come at it and say that where did this technology come from? It came from a bed of research over the last 40 plus years that has now been flung into industry landscape, coupled with the existence of the internet that's accelerated our communication, which has resulted in a lot of voices and a lot of unknowns. And a lot of those unknowns come from the idea that the researchers were solving problems in a space they never expected every single person to put this model into practice. They weren't thinking about energy efficiency, cost optimization, size of model. They were just thinking, does it get a certain accuracy on the data set or the benchmark that I'm doing? And then now it's kind of out of their hands, and we're just facing this problem now. So I have hope that we can actually try and solve this problem. We can produce new models, more energy efficient designs, move them to local computers. But we haven't given these researchers enough time and enough space to do that. So the speed and the acceleration of this, I think, is the problem.
I mean, Simon, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I was trying to
your
speak
domain.
again, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's fine. If you, well, does anybody else want to weigh in before I give it back to Simon?
I'll give you a chance to respond, I guess. So we're on the podcast. I'm putting out the next episode is on this topic around the environmental impact of AI, and we're talking to kind of various people. So someone from Hugging Face, someone from Salesforce, an academic, and someone from the Green Web Foundation, who, they have skin in the game, and some of them in very different ways. And it's clear from all those people that it is costing too much, right? In both literal cost and also energy and water cost. Like it's ballooned beyond our control, and a partly capitalist situation again. But like, it was never meant to be like this, right? If we planned this out, we wouldn't have done this, right? So I think we need to consider that innovations need to happen, but they aren't going to save us. The DeepSeek stuff has really cut down on how fast you can fine tune stuff, and how you can make use of these models quite quickly with your own data, and taught us a lot about that just 2-3 months ago. And we need more of that, and we need more ways that we can interrogate what we have and how we use it in a better way, so that we can make really cool stuff still, like Marlon and Levi's game, and leverage this thing for good and less good purposes. But I think possibly, like, from a top-down level, we should be thinking, should we be cutting deals with the government like they are in the US for building new data centers and new power stations? Should we, like, as a community, as a global community, be saying yes to this stuff, or should we be standing up for it? And I think if we probably thought it was going to go the way it did with crypto, we would have stood up for that as well. Like, we don't need this thing which turned into this asset. Basically, it wasn't something that you could buy pizza with or milk. It was just speculation. Like, I'm going to buy some crypto because I'm speculating on a market which has no physical representation. I can't buy anything with it. It's like this other thing. It didn't start out like that. It ended up like that. And God hopes that we don't get there with AI stuff, because we're just being sold snake oil at the end of the day, like things that we don't need. Does anyone have a Siri in their house?
No.
Some things are cool. Some things are really good ideas, but we don't all need them. And we don't necessarily all need massive LLMs with the cost that they are currently, providing. We don't need that necessarily. And I am a massive advocate of going, what other AI techniques? We haven't talked about any other AI techniques tonight. There are other machine learning techniques. There are other really interesting avenues. There's more symbolic ways of working. There's cool stuff. I love tech. I love working in technology. There's cool stuff going on, and we should be leveraging those things as well. And, kind of maybe thinking about the hype a little bit more.
Right. Did you want to come back on that, Harry, and then come to you, Simon, and then to you, Damian?
Just to speak to that, I definitely really agree with all of that. And thinking about thinking about it in the legacy of technology that's come before it, like Siri. No one has a Siri. And
I should say I have one.
oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay,
I don't
yeah.
I don't even know what it is.
But we, like, the climate emergency is happening. Like, we're heading towards something terrible, and we're not building technology that we're thinking about is going to survive decades into the future. We're thinking in terms of months in the future, or weeks for companies. And something that kind of really radicalized me when I was like a young engineer was I built a VR phone app for like the Google headset, and I wanted to exhibit it like 6 months later. It didn't work because Google didn't support that headset anymore. Like, needed to update Unity, needed to update my phone OS. And I think that would be amazing if we could use all of this AI technology to be thinking in a more sustainable way for decades in the future, and not in the next few weeks.
So you touched on the lead example. Yes. So Jevons paradox is this whole thing in terms of if you make something more efficient, then you might use it more, which therefore outweighs the efficiency you've gained from it. And there's like an elastic and an inelastic version of that. So right now we're going through the thing where AI has been flung at everything. So like my email client summarizes every email, even though I don't want summaries for 99.9% of it, right? So that's waste where I can't turn that feature off. It's just there, it's producing drafts for everything. So we're literally burning coal right now to do these things, which is just dumb. So I think it's 3.5% of the world's energy currently is data centers. I think that's excluding blockchain, which is just purely meant to be burning energy because that's why it exists. It has to do a complex thing which you can't reproduce. So EIA, which is like International Energy Assessment, whatever it is, Association, they predict tripling of this within the next 5 years, the amount of energy being used. And so the growth of the power we need to do that is insane. The water, when you talk about that, is even more insane. So 350 megawatt data center in Texas, one of the AI centers there, it's some like 1.1 billions of gallons of water per year is consumed. So this isn't just the water needed to actually run in that data center. That's only 1.5% of it. So it's something like 73 billion gallons a year of water just to run one data center. So the main logistic issue right now for data centers being built isn't power, it's water and where the water is. So we're literally draining everything. So I think, to your point in terms of can AI solve some of the problems like nuclear fusion, it can, but you could run that in a small data center, one place, and solve nuclear fusion, and not give this out to everyone. So we could control actually where power is being used and what it's being used for. The problem is VCs and the PE firms and everyone are stacking up, all of us having free queries right now. If you actually had the real cost of running queries, then people would have to pay more, they'd run less of them, and you wouldn't have the scaling problem we're doing right now. So there's this sort of counter thing we're having going on as well. It is in the interest of OpenAI and others to reduce the cost and the amount of processing being done, obviously. So prompt caching is like a new thing in the OpenAI API right now. So they'll recognize similar prompts and reduce your cost, but also reduce their processing going on as well. So they'll try and run a smaller model behind it. So it's in their interest because they make profit from that. Most of these companies are loss leading massively right now because it's this massive race, right? And so I think you've touched on the figure before, needing to actually build the power behind all this stuff. If you divide that number of the amount of energy needed and the power needed by a number of people in the world, no one's going to pay that amount of money to actually running AI. So this is not sustainable in a financial sense or ecology sense, really. So yeah, I think DeepSeek and others have been great in terms of you can run stuff on your laptop that's doing other interesting stuff, running things locally. And OpenAI apparently are now moving from, if we can't scale the data centers, can we use the devices in people's pockets? So you send a small model to people's end user device, they can run it because that power center is distributed around the world, but that means you're then using the network infrastructure in the middle to power things as well. So then you've actually got 2/3 of the cost is going up because we equate data centers to like 1/3 of energy use of the internet and everything else. 1/3 is the network infrastructure and 1/3 is end user devices. So if you scale all of those things up, the actual amount of usage of software generally is going to be 3 times bigger, and IT is the only sector in the world that's using more and more carbon every year. Everyone else is reducing it. So yeah, it's pretty bad. Sorry. Can I have another drink now?
Yeah. So Damian, you wanted to come in on
one last thing. I was surprised to learn that these giant data centers are part of Britain's critical national infrastructure. Mm-hmm. I just think that's staggering. I mean, like you say, Sam, I mean, some AI tools are solving very important problems, right? Especially in medicine, surgical AI tools and others. So couldn't it be possible to use an AI tool to tell you which data centers are part of a critical national infrastructure and have that defined, and the rest, are just out there. Yeah, and you pay for them if you need them.
Yeah.
Need them. I mean, it worries me that towns, for example, in Oxfordshire, who foresaw the population growth, were campaigning for years to get a new reservoir, and then that's been given the permission, and then the government says, oh well, now with this Trump trade deal, we need to be able to position where the data centers are to give some kickback to the large tech from America, and the population growth won't get the added water. That'll all go to serve these these data centers, and I don't understand either why water is the only way to cool down servers. Aren't there other ways? I mean, it just seems like the sort of physics of these data centers just seems really laggard compared to the sort of computer science behind these data centers. So, but the critical national infrastructure thing, for me, I completely disagree with.
Okay, well, what I'm going to do, because where we are time, is open it up a little bit to a couple of questions from the floor, which we'll pass around a little bit. I'll do as many as I can, and then we'll finish and let the lovely panel take a break for a bit. Right, so I have a couple more I could ask, but I'll give people a chance if they had a question of their own. Just stick your hand up if you had something that you thought could. Gentleman over there. Well, yeah.
So, like, how would you get like an AI, but like you put it complete like it's like blank and you train it with your own data set, and like let's say you're making like I don't know, conlang or an alternative photography or something, and you want to use this AI to produce text in your conlang or alternative photography. It's a niche use case, but I'm just saying, like, how would you add
So your question is, can you make an AI and just give it just your own data so that you're not taking anyone else's data?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could use like OpenAI or like as a base, but like you provide your own training data.
Yeah.
You don't use that.
Levi, can you talk to
I
us?
can jump in really fast. I think it's actually a really good question. It actually raised up one other thing. It's a bit of a nitpick that I have, which is the difference between fine-tuning and training. Actually, it requires a lot of data to train a model from scratch to perform what we have now. And I'm not talking gigabytes, I'm talking terabytes and even petabytes when it comes to video data. So training a model from scratch to produce, take your own corpus of data you have on your computer and from scratch train it, would not produce the results you actually want. But if you take a model that already exists, a foundation model, like a GPT-2, a smaller language model, and fine-tune that locally or on like some kind of rented GPU, you could probably get away with like 1 million lines of text or something like that, which is like probably 40 pages. But your quality is going to kind of degrade as your data degrades. So yeah, that's kind of my addition to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some good guides on you can run your own GPT-2 from scratch, but the data being inputted is probably a slightly soiled training database in terms of it was gathered from the internet in some way. So yeah, for the results you want, you may not need as much training data, and obviously that's back to old school like neural network training of a focused problem of these are the inputs, these are the outputs I want. Keep training until you get the result, and that's been used for many, many years for producing interesting machine learning solutions. But what we've got with LLMs and seeing the impact and what they can do, that's why we've now shifted to the foundation model approach, because they're just so much more impressive with the results.
Okay, let's say we have one swing in on a specific one. I'll pass it on to another question. Hello.
Forgive me, is it querying AI?
Querying it.
Querying.
AI.
So I'm wondering, with AI and its infinite possibilities, how I'm imagining there's quite a thin line between the fluidity of sexuality and gender and the understanding of that fluidity, whilst also not trying to constrain the boundary too much, without the risk of getting the answer of like, we can always do better. How do you initially kind of go about that with understanding the nuances and that fluidity to try and sort of make that more rigid?
Like, how do you approach building AI, or how do you approach?
How do you approach it with the context of queerness and the inclusion, but also not limiting yourself in terms of the infinite possibilities of AI? I would imagine that's quite a difficult task to kind of get down.
Yeah, I guess what we found in the workshops was that there is a lot of this language around AI that it's like really magic and it really abstracts it. From what like we've been talking about today, and getting down to like the nitty gritty of like there's data centers, like they're using water reservoirs, and there's real people building it. And what we realized is really helpful to always keep that in mind. Like these are tools that are built by people under capitalist system.
Mm-hmm.
They are often, by their nature, wanting to put people in boxes. Like the data training is all about categorizing data,
Right.
and that's what's fueling the the kind of user-facing AI. So yeah, and when we did the workshop around queer utopia, like we're bringing these kind of nebulous ideas, and yeah, we just were not finding that magic or infinite kind of possibilities in it, really.
Do you think then it's reliant on communities to feed into the data so that it's up to date and it's considerate of current trends and current considerations that are needed?
I would say it's up to the communities to damage the AI as much as possible and to build tools of their own tools of communities and not give any more power or profit to like the corporations that are building it. But
Well, can we get round to
Yeah, sorry.
Sounds like a good topic.
I think it's interesting, like the training data piece. So, like text and language is a much simpler thing to be sort of balancing and removing bias from. So, if you read like the model cards that each of these different people produces around how the models are trained and bias is removed and things are balanced to be better versus training on 4chan or Reddit or what the hell else bullshit goes into it.
Yeah.
But the image generation piece is a really difficult problem because getting good classified images of what we all understand as humans is a much more difficult problem. And if it turns out that porn is the thing you've got access to and there's more porn training data, then that's going to influence what people look like, within that data set. Like Midjourney famously, like V2 of Midjourney, they removed all the porn inside the training data and then women looked really weird in there. So they had to add porn back in and then add a filter on top of it to remove the porn images generated.
Looked weird to who?
So to everyone, to be fair, to everyone, like from the results were just very strange. Like it didn't understand what women were anymore, which shows that the original training data was maybe male based in terms of it understood more men were in the training data set originally. But these data sets were so big that humans couldn't review the sort of data size that was there. So they're just sort of throwing stuff in and seeing what the results come out as. And so it's not so much that you can review and adjust that to your point in terms of, what queer images or whatever the project you did would be feeding in as. So how do you balance and broaden that data set to be equally evaluated and biased, I guess, is the challenge. Because all it's looking at is volume of data and classification.
Okay. Yes.
Pretty simple question. When a GUG is generated, who owns it?
Who what?
Who owns it?
We don't. I don't know. I actually don't know. We don't have any IP on GUG, so we haven't taken the stance that this is ours. I know there's a lot of different policies out there, especially if you look at different generators, people online. I mean, you talk to some of this, but if you look at some of their policies, it says anything you generate is your own. So our current policy right now is anything you generate is your own in the game. And you can actually take that data and do something with it. It's available to you in the game. So we don't gatekeep that. Yeah.
Okay.
Obviously, the conversation's been around generative AI today, which is a buzzword. But do you see, AI obviously comprises so many other types, use cases, whatever you want to call it. Do you see a more interesting, more innovative space of the artificial intelligence ecosystem that in some ways you are more sold on?
So I think for me, like being an old school AI person as well as new sort of Gen AI person, I think using Gen AI to help build and develop better old school AI is interesting. So, like goal-oriented agents and NPCs and dialogue tree systems and all the kind of traditional AI we've used for years and years, which is more predictable in terms of what the output is you get as a gamer. So the reason neural networks were not allowed in games for a long time was because a QA team couldn't verify every possible output of the game. So therefore, if there's neural network mentioned in there, your publisher will be like, no, you're not putting that stuff live. You can use it pre-launch to generate your data to produce your AI models and the way that an AI would react, but you couldn't use it live outside of like genetic algorithms like Creatures and all the games back in the day that did some more experimental stuff. So yeah, I think using Gen AI to build bigger traditional AI structures than we've always done, I think is a really exciting space. And also maybe come up with better algorithms for some of that stuff as well.
Yeah, I think to add that, actually, I think a space that is really untapped is tiny AI. And I'm not talking like, let's get a foundation model and scale it down by 500 million. I'm talking about like million parameter models. And those things are tiny. Those things fit on a quarter of your GPU on your PC. And you can take a data set of, say, 4 gigabytes of animation, public domain, train it on that, and do keyframe prediction. And then you can have sort of a generative character that you built yourself with your own data in your own time, train it over a week. And I think it's about giving people access, the ability to begin to explore these problems. And I think the coolest thing is actually getting game developers to try to think about those problems, not tech people coming in to tell us how to build games. Because there's a lot of these little problems out there, like fluid simulations. They're very expensive. You can bake it into a neural network and run it in real time if you grab the data. So these sorts of problems just aren't being applied right now, and they should be in games.
Yes, Zebra AI is working out the fluid simulation side. They've done some cool work with using that to produce fluid.
I just wanted, while we've got a lot of people here, as a really little social experiment, is just ask a couple of questions and people raising their hands and no judgment either way. Out of interest, how many people here are using AI in their, everyday life? You're using it to help you write an email, something like that. Okay. How many people in here consciously don't use AI? Right. Okay, there's some middling. And how many people here are being asked to use AI as part of their work, whether you want to or not? Few.
Oh.
Middling, yeah.
We do.
Okay. Yeah. And then my sort of final one on that asking round. How many people here are interested in AI but don't really know, are unsure how they go about using it in game dev? There's a few. Yeah, I mean, I'll put myself in that category as well. Okay, that's really interesting. Right, do we have a couple more questions? So we'll go there and then we'll come to you and then I think we'll put it there.
Thanks. I wanted to ask about, so Ben mentioned capitalism.
Sorry.
So it's like this Marxist idea of like capital is dead labour, right? It needs workers to live, it needs workers to survive. And like, I wonder if the panel has an opinion on like, is our LLMs going to fundamentally undermine our relationship to capital as workers? Are they going to fuck us forever? Or are they going to liberate us from the shackles of capital? Or is it much more complicated than that? Like, what's people's take on it? It's like, I mean, in terms of collective bargaining as workers, like, does it change our relationship with companies, with capital?
Yes.
How?
So I mean, this is you obviously pulled on a thread that I've been grappling with, right? That we have this kind of like change in how we operate at the moment happening, and it's happening to us. It's not happening to the labour force. You know what I mean? It's happening to the blue collar people and the middle classes, and it's happening very fast. And it will, as you said, fuck us. So it's what that looks like after the fact. So if we consider that we can't, like, if people don't step in and put an end to, certain practices, then some people will be out of jobs. We've seen a lot of this already. And the question is, will new jobs, whatever they are, get created enough that we transition into a world where we're just doing different things? There is a world of abundant, if you think about it, informational wealth, right? So a lot of the work that we do is around moving information around. It's like how we, it's not really, moving resources around per se. So is this new capitalism all about us exploiting that and having a wealth of information and being able to do things with it? Or are we going to be downgraded? Are we all going to be chopping wood and clean toilets, right? There's a wonderful person who just put on LinkedIn, I didn't want, my artwork done by AI, I wanted my washing up, you know what I mean? And I think we have to seriously consider that whole kind of thing that we're doing, right? And it's easier to do what we're doing. And I think it's probably fine, but we have to change how we think about how we actually subsist as human beings in order to make it fine. We can't just sit on our laurels and just go, well, if I lose my job, I'll get a new job, and then suddenly you aren't skilled to work anywhere anymore. You aren't. Like, all the jobs that you are skilled to do no longer exist, right? And this is a real reality that we live in. And this might feel like bad, and we're here to talk about game stuff. But that's like a reality that like illustrators are facing right now, translators, right? There's a real kind of like load of people who are the coal face of this change. And they are very intelligent people who are having to grapple with what the real reality of their situation is, right? And that's fine if we transition to some sort of like universal basic income or some sort of different way of operating. And that's great. And like, I'm up for that. Bring it on. You know, we should do that. We should all rally to change the situation we're currently in. We're not a big enough group of people to do that. But like, if you could talk to other people for me on my behalf and say that that's what we're now doing and talking about, that's great. Because I think as humanity, we should be considering what we should be doing with ourselves. And I love making stuff with tech. And God knows I don't want the AI to be doing my job for me. You know what I mean? I don't want to not code anymore, necessarily, unless I'm doing something infinitely better. And I don't see what that is yet. Sorry.
Open it up. Yeah.
Could I add to that?
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting with this new phase of technology is how it's changing the distribution of how we value labor. So in the past, sort of in the 90s, even early 2000s, there was an idea that we needed more graduates to fill higher skilled, higher value jobs. And then early information communication technologies were set up this skill bias, and you saw people being paid more at the top. And that was happening for a time. People in the middle, in sort of routine manufacturing jobs, were losing jobs because of the forms of technology. Now, of course, it's replacing whole swathes of jobs and tasks within those high-skilled jobs. And the value of work, on average, has been stagnating for around 20 years in Britain. I mean, we're earning now in real terms the same as we were 20 years ago on average, right? So we're each individually maybe earning some increments because of sort of seniority or more experience with work and so on. But on average, the wages are stagnating. And I think we're moving very quickly to a kind of a winner-takes-all economy. In Britain, if you're not in finance and you're not in tech, you won't be able to find a mortgage to buy a house if you're young. And we've very quickly transitioned into this new form of AI-led capitalism, really led by sort of high tech and large tech from the States and from China. And I think we don't know what to do. We're doing a parallel project on agri-tech, and it's really interesting in agri-tech because AI is being used to do all the sort of management, logistics, there's high-skilled jobs in agriculture, and a lot of the work of the laborers, especially like picking strawberries, which is it's a very human skill, and there are no robots that can do this because they just crush all the strawberries. So the agriculture trade body is arguing with the government, saying we need to value that so-called unskilled labor more in order to free up migration and visas. And they're saying precisely because it can't be replaced by new technology, we should value it more. That's kind of an interesting concept, right? So going back to your washing the dishes, there's an example. It can't be done by, well, it can be done by a dishwasher, obviously, but find something else, mopping the floor or whatever it is. You find other jobs that can't be replaced by technology, and ask the question, should we therefore value that more as unique, original, human skill? And the same for creative work. The longer that creative work cannot be replaced by AI, the more we should be using collective bargaining or other strategies to bargain up the value. But I don't think we talk enough about the value of labour.
Yeah, and I think you can extend that to healthcare and the caring side. There's a lot of talk about how we should be valuing care generally more. But also it's weird. It's a weird situation because we're the consumers. We're creating this stuff for us, right? So like all this AI stuff, do we want it just to be doing stuff and then we're going to consume it and we'll be like, cool, and we've just taken ourselves out of the bargain there? It's a weird situation, isn't it?
I'll add a sort of curveball into it and abuse my position as moderator really briefly. Because one of the things that I don't see is how how any of this stuff makes any money. Because this was touched on before. Like, so, and I'm going to do the show of hands. So all of you, and there's a bunch of you put your hands up saying you use AI now. If, out of interest, how many of you pay a conscious subscription to an AI tool to use that AI? So there's a few. So if that cost double it, would you still use it? Stick your hand up. And if it triple? So the hand, yeah?
Wow.
10 times? So, and this, the reason I say that is
You
because...
haven't watched the latest series of Black Mirror.
Yeah. It's
Tell me.
interesting because it's interesting. Some people are prepared to pay a cost for it, and that's really interesting. But obviously, I think and something correct if I'm wrong. I'm assuming these are all massively subsidised by the VC money in it, like
hugely.
Yeah. So, and that's the bit that I genuinely I'm not sure in this discussion of labour and capital is whether there is any money in it.
Yeah.
Like, I genuinely don't know.
So I think ultimately there's an economist from years ago, like when the industrial revolutions and stuff were starting, about the idea we'd all have loads of leisure time, or American economists leisure time, and it just didn't really happen, right? Because everyone wants to keep up with the Joneses and works all the hours and everything else still continues. And although people are losing jobs to some of these AIs and abilities and other stuff, they will find other jobs or retrain, or the wrangler of the AI who provides the human element for the things that AIs are not doing. And so I think, couple that with the fact that I do think LLMs are plateauing, the money will run out of these businesses at some point, or the court cases will get them. We'll end up having a bit of a reset, and we won't really see this huge kind of like black hole of no one having jobs and us all doing the dishwasher stacking, because computer vision and robotics is a really hard problem. Because actually interpolating between what's inside the training data set isn't creative, because it's only able to go somewhere in between those points it's been trained on, and human innovation and creativity still will be key. So as long as we keep critical thinking, which is a thing that Satya from Microsoft was saying recently is a downside, they're seeing less critical thinking in their employees who are doing these studies and work studies based on AI usage, is that critical thinking is going down in their employees. So therefore, you keep those skills, that's really important. They also cancelled several data centers recently at Microsoft, which there's arguments that might have been financial, but it could have also been that they're not seeing the improvements in productivity they're expecting from their AI usage as well. So I think there's a rebalancing to happen. The hype is going to fall away at some point. There's definitely usage there, but we're not quite going on that same trajectory we've been on the last few years.
Yeah, great. So I'll come to yours, the last question, then I'll give the panel final things, so where people can find out more about what they're doing or info there. But yeah.
So I guess I'm generally getting the sort of the vibe in the room seems to be that large language models, image generation, all of that is all a bit sketchy. Morally, environmentally, all of that. Is there anything going on in AI or machine learning that isn't sketchy, or is it all fundamentally kind of all eventually going to run into the same problems?
Vector search, that's really good.
You're talking about like vector data?
Yeah, could you explain what you mean by vector search?
Yeah, so we have search, right? And search is quite crude, let's say. But because we have some LLMs, some way, and we pass text into these systems, and they convert those like instantaneously into not text. Like they don't deal with text. That's not what they're doing with. They're dealing with the numbers. So straight away, you've got all these numbers happening through the models, right? If you just chop off the head of the model, you've just got a load of numbers which represents the text. And if you put in a database like this random set of like review data you've put in, and give it a vector, you can kind of use that mathematically to say what is close to that thing. And what you find is that loads of things are like sort of close, and they're sort of talking about similar things. And that's what a vector database is. So you'll get this like this really cool thing that happens where you're like, I'm looking for like pillows that I can read with or whatever, and it's like, what you're talking about, mate, is a fucking wedge pillow for reading, and you're like, yes, and it's because it's able to like look at similarities between things that other people said, or categorize it in a certain way. So you can get very disparate things related to each other through this vectorization process, which is using that kind of like chop the head off LLM situation. And we don't have to do anything with that anymore because it's we've kind of solved that, which is nice. So if you ever want to kind of like, if you have this wave of this massive documentation and you just want to find like a question to deal with it, you should be able to do that now. Like that's possible because we can vectorize that information. And I think that's really powerful. And I think that's like, one of the things I was working on last year was NLP, natural language processing issue around games and reviews, and how do you think about reviews, and people say garbage stuff in reviews, and how do we relate them to each other, and sentiment, all this sort of stuff. And part of that, the best thing in that whole situation was the vector lookup. Everything else was a bit kind of iffy. But
So, anyone else got stuff where they think, no, this is good?
Yeah, I can just jump in really fast with what I think is a really untapped area of AI, especially for video games. It's actually largely what I focus most of my time on for my PhD. It's about the fact that there's a property of these models. It's not just about them being generalists. It's about them being able to trade off compute for memory. So you can get a problem that's very compute heavy, like for example, fluid simulation, and bake it inside a neural network. And the neural network says, well, I'm going to memorize the data, but I'm going to give you the ability to interpolate in the data space. And these do it really well, actually. They do it, for example, like for rendering tasks. So neural rendering, it's very hard to render a scene with high resolution, and you can actually use a neural network to approximate the ray tracing. Same with signed distance fields. These are hard things to estimate for very complex models. You can do approximate signed distance field estimation. And fluid simulations and physics-based animation, all these things you can build with tiny models with reasonable sized data sets. And it's all in the research. And I think these are going to like blow holes in game design. We can do amazing things with this. And it almost has nothing to do with foundation models at all and Gen AI, which is really cool. And I wish more people knew about this stuff and we had abilities to kind of productize this and people trying to solve problems about how to turn these into games. So yeah, there's tons of stuff out there.
Yeah, similar sort of stuff with DLSS and FSR, like these upscaling technologies in graphics we've seen. So that's based on some of the same machine learning stuff. There's again some doubts over where the training data came from. Like NVIDIA had some very interesting stuff in their licenses years ago of what they could take from their clients' games. But I think the benefits of DLSS are pretty good, and like compute efficiency and power efficiency is really good from those GPU systems. I think for Co-op as a company, like we've been looking at some workflow improvements and production improvements with LLMs. So whether that's sort of the code tasks, the plumbing pieces that you don't want to be doing and spending your time on because it's not a good use of time, or like the QA summarization of stuff or capturing bugs, all that kind of stuff. We're doing some interesting stuff around that. And even for like doing commit review, sort of summarize this code as an initial version of a commit review draft. Like that just saves some time and makes you not miss out on certain things. So there's certain workflow kind of starting points that you can use, which just saves developers time. And if you're paying huge amounts out for a developer and you can do that very quickly, either on a local model or somewhere else, then there are some uses there, I think. But I still have a problem with the data it was trained on to do that. If we fix that problem, I think we'd be in a good place for some of those sort of utilities.
Damian, I don't know if you wanted to come on and where you like a positive AI use case, I guess we're kind of edging towards. Say no. We're not
Well,
making
I
that.
wanted to say, like healthcare is often brought up, and we did a workshop around voice AI and how people who are losing their voice can have their voice recreated by AI, so that then they can use that after it's gone. But there was recently a case where a woman, the company then took the voice back from her because she said knickers. So yeah, again, I think it's all the ethics of like how it's created.
Yeah, a friend of mine had a stroke, and like she finds Gen AI really useful in terms of communicating through it, interpreting the way she see things and write stuff out now. So there are really positive kind of examples of use cases like that, but again, it doesn't need to be trained on the internet to do that thing.
And Damian?
I like the example we were talking just before coming on. I forgot her name. The woman she's looking at her phone now. But anyway, she was telling me the example you gave me about the AI that would check the tone of your email. I thought that was really cool. What was it called?
Goblin tool.
Goblin tool. There you are. So if you're not sure, if you're in a bit of a ranty mood, but you can't see it because you're so tied up in your emotions, apparently you can check the text and it'll say, yeah, actually, that wasn't very neutral.
Excellent. Okay, well, thank you all for that. So if you want to just give a plug for we'll start here and work our way down. Levi,
Sure.
we're going to plug what you're doing. Like I say, what I will do is I'll put all the links from that people have given here into one of the best next Bristol Games Hub newsletters, which is a good incentive to make sure you're signed up.
Yeah.
Not. Right.
Yeah, so kind of as I've reiterated already, my interest is in AI in games, and really Martian Lawyers Club is about exploring the space of where we can build games without only using AI. But there's a lot of unaddressed problems there, and if you go to martianlawyersclub.com or go to my blog, I actually have a lot of writings about instances and use cases where we use AI in ways that I think are surprising, not at scale, not industrialized, and just solve interesting tiny problems in game dev. So check out what we're doing. Yeah.
So 2 plugs from me. So jeco.co, so jeco.co is our automated optimization tools. We're not fully announced yet. We've kind of been stealth. But we've got an announcement coming up in a few weeks, Nikki. Yeah. And so we're going to be doing case studies for games or software. So we'll take your game for free, evaluate what we can do to optimize it, and help you out with your CPU, GPU, disk and network optimization to reduce the power usage of your game, whether it's on end user devices, console, PC, whatever, as well as cloud. And then Cooperative Innovations, so coopinnovations.co.uk. We've got a platform called Kernel, which helps you basically spin up your own multi-user, multi-platform, UGC-enabled Unreal Engine game with all the features, kind of like how Unreal Editor for Fortnite works, but for your own game building. So you can be up and running in 30 minutes with all those features without having senior engineers and back-end developers doing it all for you. So that's Co-op Innovations.
I think I'm Harry SW on Mastodon, so I'll be posting about stuff there. Our next project's going to be a queer telephone line, so take it back old school. I'll be posting about
And with Marcella here, we're hoping to meet as many of you as we can, that we want to interview and ask you about your experiences with AI, especially if you're an artist, a designer, or a programmer. We're really interested in how you're sort of crossing expertise. Artists dabbling with AI for coding, programmers dabbling with AI for art history, etc. So these kind of crossovers of disciplines we're interested in. So if I
so they should just come and grab you and
please, or if I bang you on the shoulder, if you could,
Yeah.
if you can share emails, or that'd be lovely. And,
I've done
we
an
can follow
interview
up.
with them. It was very friendly, very nice.
It would be really short. It'd be sort of 15-20 minutes. Yeah. Wouldn't
And
take
last
too
but
long.
not least, Ben.
I've got a few things. So join the newsletter if you haven't already. So bristolgameshub.com. It's on there. We will change the website at some point. I apologise. Just find it. You can work it out. I run the Machine Ethics podcast. So you can find that Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, whatever they call it these days. And also, if you want someone who can talk at you for hours about capitalism or AI and ethics, and you're doing an AI project, come talk to me. And I also have a shout out from Ash at Impress, because Impact conference is next month. So please go to impress.games/impact, which is a Bristol-based indie game marketing. It's good. Go check it out.
Yeah, so we won't be doing a Games Hub event next month because we'll be going along to Ash's event, Ash and others, and there was a bunch of people organised. It was a really good event last year, so I highly recommend it.
It's our answer to mini develop, right?
Yeah.
Tiny develop.
Is there ice cream as well?
Yeah, why not? You're bringing the ice cream.
On this point of like meetups and game meetups and stuff, unrelated, we also run, Marlon and I, the Bristol Indie Developers, a monthly meetup. If you've had not enough of Bristol Games Hub, come check out what we do. We get like 40, 50 plus people just making weird games. So Bristol Indie Developers.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, thank you all for your time and energy in this. Much appreciated. Thank you.